Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here. Normally, we're focused on the waiver wire with this Tuesday show, but Tuesday of this week, Jared, we finally got the news that we've all been waiting for. The Raiders are trading Davante Adams to the Jets for a conditional draft pick, shaking up two offenses. And now it's our job to break that down into what it means for fantasy players. It all starts, of course, with like what we can expect from Davante Adams the rest of the way. And I don't think you can answer what to expect from Davante Adams without also answering what to expect from Garrett Wilson, because they're now tied to each other in the same offense. So the primary question here, what should I expect from Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson and versus each other going forward?
First things first, we'll have to see about Adams' hamstring injury, whether it was real, whether he's ready to go. We'll see about that. So assuming health for both, my eye test and like all the aging curve stuff we look at tells me Garrett Wilson is the better player at this point. If you look at some of the advanced metrics though, Wilson's leading Adams this year in Pro Football Focus receiving grade. Adams beat Wilson last year, though. Adams also leads Wilson this year in ESPN Open Score and ESPN's overall receiver scores, which also factors in like catching ability and yards after catch stuff. So I still think Wilson's better. I think it's probably close, though. I think what matters most, though, is what Aaron Rodgers thinks. And he obviously was a big part of this trade being made. It seems like Rodgers is basically running that team. I think targets are going to be close between these two guys. I still think Wilson will be the more efficient player on those targets. Again, I just think he's the better player at this point in their career. So if you made me pick between the two, I'd go Garrett Wilson. I think they're going to be close in fantasy value, though. I think they're probably going to, trade off useful weeks. One of them will probably be disappointing most weeks. I think you consider both wide receiver twos at this point and kind of go from there.
If you don't think that it matters significantly what Aaron Rodgers thinks of the two, just look at the season that Allen Lazard is having so far. Allen Lazard is not a studly NFL player, but he sits 11th among wide receivers in total PPR points right now, 18th in PPR points per game, because he's an Aaron Rodgers guy. He's got the trust. We know that Davante Adams has that trust as well. We know that Davante Adams is a good player. Right? Like, that's not up for debate. I guess the reason for uncertainty between the two is that one is 24 and the other is on the wrong side of 30. There's probably a hamstring injury actually in play there. So that has to be factored in as well. The aging body is going to add some risk on that front. I think those factors make me lean Garrett Wilson as well. I will not look at either player and say, this guy's definitely going to be, unchanged. He's going to dominate the rest of the way, and he's the guy I want. I would say Garrett Wilson's slight edge because he's younger, because he's been with the team already. He's not moving to a new place for this year. But I won't be shocked if Davante Adams outscores Garrett Wilson the rest of the way, especially because he has that trust in the end zone. It could be close enough where a couple of touchdowns, one way or the other, swings the balance in Adams's favor or Wilson's favor. But Adams, as a taller guy, has showed that connection with Aaron Rodgers. I think there's room for both of these guys to be productive. We're far enough away now from summer drafts that we shouldn't be really weighing them versus their ADPs, but rather figuring out what they can give us going forward. These Jets have been favoring the pass anyway. They entered week 6 as a top 5 team in pass rate over expected. That's certainly not going to drop after you trade for Davante Adams and on a team that's trying to rebound now, already fired its coach. It's clearly trying to make the playoffs and win a Super Bowl. They've got an aging quarterback. They're bought into this small window. So I expect plenty more passing. And I think that gives both Adams and Wilson room to be productive players for us. I think that both definitely could be top 24 PPR wideouts the rest of the way.
Yeah, as you said, Jets 5th in pass rate over expected. They're 2nd in neutral pass rate. They're 3rd in pass attempts right now. And adding Davante Adams is only going to push them further towards the pass. So it should be a team that ranks, I think, top 5 in pass attempts the rest of the way. And I would think that Adams and Wilson will combine for over 50% of this team's targets going forward. So definitely room for both of them. I posted a Twitter poll right after this trade was made, just asking people who they think is going to average more targets per game. I should have just asked who people think are going to average more fantasy points the rest of the season, but targets per game is basically a proxy for fantasy points. 70% of people think it's going to be Davante Adams leading in targets the rest of the way. To me, that makes Davante Adams someone that I'd consider selling high on right now if you have him. I think the excitement might be a bit overboard for what he's going to end up being for this offense.
If the market actually believes that that's the case, then to me, it sounds like they're looking at this combo and thinking that it's more like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, as opposed to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, from a couple years ago. I think it's going to be more like the Metcalf-Lockett combo where there's room for both of them to produce, but the gap in targets between them is just simply not that wide. I can understand if somebody just, looks at this and is like, oh, Davante Adams played with Aaron Rodgers forever. Aaron Rodgers is going to favor him. Like I said, maybe that ends up being the case, but we've also got a young first-round pick that Aaron Rodgers talked up pretty hard this summer. He likes Garrett Wilson as well. Garrett Wilson's been getting a lot of targets this year, so I think it'll be close between them. And if people actually do believe it the way that your poll is showing, I'm going to try to buy Garrett Wilson, not just consider selling Davante Adams, but I'd put some feelers out there for Garrett Wilson, see how little I might be able to get him for.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And then, as far as Aaron Rodgers goes, I don't think he's going to become like a weekly quarterback one that you just kind of plug and play. I do think, though, he could, be a top 15, like a borderline quarterback one, a spot start option. He's not the same player, obviously. He's over 40 years old, coming off the Achilles. He's just missing throws he hasn't missed in the past. And the Jets offensive line has been an issue recently, too. So those issues aren't going away. But we said, this is a team that's probably going to be top 5 in pass attempts the rest of the way. He now has 2 really good wide receivers. Like, Rodgers could, again, be like a borderline top 12 quarterback the rest of the way.
And, we're talking primarily about the 2 really good receivers. But like I said, Allen Lazard's still there, has gotten plenty, has Aaron Rodgers' trust. Tyler Conklin's fine. They'll help. I agree with you on where Aaron Rodgers will be. I think he'll ultimately be in QB2 territory, but there's room for him to be Jared Goff with more passing volume going forward. What about Lazard and Conklin? Are we going to get fantasy relevance from either of those guys the rest of the way?
Probably not. Maybe Conklin because he's a tight end, right? But like his target share is going to sink, obviously. Allen Lazard is around like an 18% target share right now. That probably drops below 15%, which just isn't a number you can trust people in starting lineups with. So assuming Wilson and Adams are healthy, I think Lazard, I think he's cuttable at this point in like shallower fantasy leagues. And then Conklin you probably hang on to, but he's kind of back into that clear tight end 2 territory for me.
Just for a little more context on Lazard, he's tied for 24th among receivers in targets right now. That's tied with Brandon Ayuk. It's 1 target behind Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman. So he's been heavily involved so far. I don't know. I'll be curious to see if Lazard continues to siphon some value from those top 2. I certainly expect him to be the easy third among them. I'm just curious to see how far down a third he is, and wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being annoying going forward. I agree. He's probably not going to be helpful for fantasy, but might wind up being annoying. And I agree on Conklin. I mean, he's tied for 9th among tight ends in targets so far. He's just tight end 27 in PPR points per game. Still hasn't scored a touchdown since week 8 of 2022. So Tyler Conklin might just be allergic to the end zone. I don't think he's really going to be significantly relevant, but he also can be somebody that you just play and you hope you get 4 catches in a given week.
He also lost some routes to Jeremy Ruckert last night, which was disappointing to see. So maybe 2 things working against him here. And of course, we were talking about all this target competition. Breece Hall still in the mix too. He's been seeing 4, 5, 6 targets per game. So I hope Allen Lazard does not see enough volume to be fantasy relevant the rest of the way. If he does, that's going to be a problem for both Wilson and Adams.
And then I think a sneaky loser in that Jets offense might be Braylon Allen, who had a couple of weeks where he looked like he was going to have some standalone potential, but even since then, 6 and 3 touches the past 2 games. And like we said, with the pass rate over expected, the Jets are probably going to be one of the league's most pass-friendly offenses going forward. If they're putting Braylon Allen on the field nearly as much as Breece Hall in those situations, then they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, Allen already looked like a guy with declining fantasy value just coming out of that Monday night game against the Bills, because in that game, Breece Hall set a season high in both snap rate and route rate, also had a season high 18 carries. So it looks like one of the changes the new coaching staff made is, a bit more towards Hall, less towards Braylon Allen. Then, like you said, Matt, with Adams there, it's just another weapon. So I think Allen probably back to being just a pure Breece Hall handcuff.
Yeah, still worth hanging on to as a handcuff because he's a Breece Hall injury away from being quite relevant, but don't expect to be able to start Braylon Allen. And then on the other side, there's the Raiders offense. Doesn't merit nearly as much talk, I don't think. I'm really not sure that we're getting actual fantasy relevance from anybody outside of Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers the rest of the way. What about you?
Yeah, kind of like with the Jets. I mean, this should be a situation where I think Bowers and Myers, once he's healthy, are probably combining for like half of this team's targets. We've seen Brock Bowers have a 25% target share over the last 3 weeks without Davante Adams, 8.3 targets per game. I think Bowers now is battling with Travis Kelce for overall tight end 1 the rest of the way. And Jacoby Myers, he had 42 and 24% target shares in his 2 games without Davante Adams before missing this past week. And Myers has always been a strong target earner, even going back to his Patriots days. So I think once he's healthy, Myers is probably going to be a weekly wide receiver 3 just based on that volume.
Yeah, he's already 38th in PPR points per game, but 27th in expected PPR points per game. That should improve with Davante Adams gone. And, I think that seems like a reasonable range for expectation, somewhere in the wide receiver 27 to wide receiver 20 range of expected points, not set up in an offense that's going to maximize his real points versus expected most likely, but a usable range. Trey Tucker's been, cute so far as a fantasy asset. He's had a couple nice games. He's also wide receiver 72 in expected PPR points per game. Obviously, that should climb as well with no Davante Adams, but does he really have a shot to climb into the top 40 at wide receiver? I don't think so. And if you're talking to me about a Raiders receiver who's got like wide receiver 46 expected points, I'm not interested.
Yeah, I think you'll probably be happy with Trey Tucker if you took him in best ball. He'll probably have, 2, 3, 4 games where he pops up, but he's still the clear number 3 option in a bad passing game. He's at 12% targets per route run this season, which is a really bad number. Like, he's on the field, but he's just not getting targeted because he's just kind of a small average NFL wide receiver. So again, he'll pop up, but I don't think he's going to be someone that we can rely on as a weekly starter in lineup setting fantasy leagues.
On the other side of that Monday night game, that probably really didn't make this trade happen, but it didn't help to have the Jets lose. Ray Davis was a key piece in the Bills winning that game with James Cook out. He had 20 carries, 97 yards on the ground, 3 catches for 55 more yards, most of that coming on a 42-yard catch on one of those classic Josh Allen improv plays. We'll see about James Cook's toe injury this week, but Jared, I think there's room for Ray Davis to be more involved in the offense going forward than he has been to this point, even once James Cook returns. And I think he's pretty easily the top running back target on waivers this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think he definitely is. It was just a strong performance from Ray Davis, who had a strong preseason as well. Last night against the Jets, 3.45 yards after contact per attempt. That was 7th best among 26 running backs in week 6. He forced 7 missed tackles. That was 2nd best among running backs. I think, like you said, Matt, most importantly, Ray Davis out-carried Ty Johnson 20-4. He out-targeted him 3-0. Ray Davis led Ty Johnson in pass routes 17-11. So if nothing else, Davis is now confirmed as a high-end handcuff, a strong RB2 if James Cook misses more time. And again, it's that toe injury for Cook. Those can be tough. It sounds like he was like pushing to play in this game, but you kind of woke up on Monday morning, just didn't feel good enough with that toe injury. So that could definitely be something that lingers, that causes him to miss more time, or even causes him to just, not be as effective, be limited in these games, and just result in the Bills taking some work off of Cook's plate and giving it to Ray Davis. So I do think there's a chance Davis has some standalone RB3 flex value even when Cook returns to the lineup. Davis will probably be more valuable in non-PPR and half PPR leagues, because I do think Cook probably still assumes most of the pass catching work once he's healthy.
James Cook was a complimentary back in college, though. I think he's at his best not playing the workhorse kind of role that Buffalo has tried to push him into early. And, like I've said on here before, but certainly behind the scenes before, I think James Cook is just an okay player. I don't think he merits the kind of work he's had since Joe Brady took over last year. So I think Buffalo will be better off with Ray Davis more involved, and certainly Cook's toe injury adds upside to having Ray Davis on your team. Any other must-have guys you see on waivers this week? We've got 8 other running backs in our waiver wire pickups article this week. So any of those guys that you're especially interested in?
I'd say must-haves would be too strong. It is a good week to like churn through the running backs on the end of your bench and, sub some of these guys in for guys that you might not have as much value at this point. I think, Isaac Guerendo obviously needs to be mentioned, with Jordan Mason iffy for week 7 with his shoulder sprain. Head coach Kyle Shanahan called him day-to-day. So it sounds like he has a chance. It's, that tends to be like a pain tolerance thing. So we'll see. Guerendo out carried Patrick Taylor 10-5 in the second half of that Thursday night game. I think that's kind of what we'd see. I don't think Guerendo would take over the Jordan Mason role and get, 18 to 22 carries going forward. I think it'd be, more like a 2-to-1 split. The problem for Guerendo in the short term is they get the Chiefs on Sunday, and the Chiefs have been one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They are actually first in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. They're allowing just 3.1 yards per carry to running backs. So tough matchup for Guerendo if he gets the nod, but he's a big back with 4.3 speed in this Niners running game that's, always efficient. So I still think Guerendo would be probably like a low end RB2 if he ends up starting this weekend.
Yeah, I don't think he's a must start if Jordan Mason's out, but definitely startable if Jordan Mason doesn't play in this game. The key there, though, is that we don't know if Jordan Mason's going to play. Tried to come back into last week's game, has had an extra bit of time because it was a Thursday game last week. So, don't overbid on Guerendo this week and then find out that you don't even have one game to be able to start him. I think Sean Tucker and Kamani Vidal are most interesting to me overall, assuming I don't need a quick fix for week 7. The Tampa Bay backfield's unsettled. We just saw what Sean Tucker did. I think that probably even surprised the Bucs, given that they've had him since the beginning of last season, and he has barely touched the ball since the first 2 weeks of his rookie year. We had Todd Bowles say that should be a 3-headed monster going forward. We hate that for fantasy, but it's also an unsettled backfield. So there's room for them to kind of figure things out as we go and see exactly who gets the touches. And obviously, if we have injuries along the way, then options fall away and leave touches for certain guys. So I think Sean Tucker's performance makes him worth stashing somewhere in the league now. Kamani Vidal is obviously easily behind J.K. Dobbins, but there's also room for him to turn into the Dobbins handcuff even once Gus Edwards is healthy again. Yep. Was very good in college, was an intriguing prospect, even though he lasted until day 3. So I like him as a stash because we at least got, even though we only got 6 touches from him, we got the one big play in that game.
Yeah, I think Vidal already is the J.K. Dobbins handcuff. I mean, Gus Edwards is out for 3 more games. He just has nothing left, and I think Vidal is just a better player at this point. So I hope the Chargers see that and make Vidal the number 2 running back even when Gus Edwards returns. So I prefer Vidal among these 2 guys, over Sean Tucker. I do think Tucker's worth adding in, leagues of 12-plus teams. I just still think Tucker's the number 3 running back in Tampa, despite how inefficient Rachaad White has been. I don't think they're going to go away from him, at least ahead of Tucker on the depth chart there. But I mean, my takeaway from the Bucs game last week is, Tampa doesn't want to overwork Bucky Irvin, which makes sense. I kind of wish we had projected that he wasn't going to, dominate the backfield because he is a smaller guy. Irving still delivered for people that started him because he's just super efficient. But I think what we learned is that, if either Rachaad White or Bucky Irving goes down, that, Tucker's probably going to be a guy that gets, 40% of that backfield work, which obviously, again, makes him worth owning in a lot of fantasy leagues.
I mean, who would have known after the Bucs spent a year and a half trying to not give Sean Tucker the ball that he would all of a sudden split evenly with Bucky Irving. But, maybe it's just a reminder to say, even if you don't know what the answer is going to be, you make sure that you are conservative on the expectations for a relative unknown, which is what Bucky Irving was. On to streaming defenses for this week and next year. And I think it's pretty obvious for week 7. It's the Bengals against Cleveland, because Deshaun Watson is 2 things at this point, just talking about on the field stuff. He's very bad at playing quarterback, and he is very good at allowing sacks to opposing defenses. The Eagles had 6 sacks going into this past Sunday's game. They had 5 in that game against Cleveland. The Bengals will get Deshaun Watson plenty. And, if you start with a low ceiling offense that gets sacked a lot, then it's easy to see the upside from there.
Yeah, this is the case. You start looking ahead at the schedule, who the Browns are playing. You can start, picking up their opponent a week or 2 in advance just to have that. Because I think whoever is playing the Browns is, going to be a top 8, maybe even a top 5 defense in our weekly rankings. If you can't get the Bengals to speak, I like the Jags, who not a good defense, but I do think Drake May now being quarterback for the Patriots means more upside for opposing defenses. It means more upside for the Patriots offense, but also more upside for opposing defenses. Jacoby Brissett, for as bad as he was not really taking sacks, and he wasn't throwing interceptions. Drake May, in his NFL debut, 4 sacks and 2 interceptions, also had a fumble in that game against Houston. Houston, obviously a much better defense than Jacksonville, but I still think there's going to be upside for sacks and takeaways for whoever's playing Drake May going forward.
And there's potential for it to be a rough game too, with Jacksonville staying over there in London after playing last week's game, and New England traveling over there. It's going to be a different schedule for everybody involved, probably even more challenging for a rookie. So you can't count on the Jaguars, but I think chasing upside is more important than worrying about downside in general if you're streaming a defense. For week 8, I would look to go ahead and stash the Chiefs. They were 37% rostered on Sleeper as of this morning. They're at the 49ers this week, so that number is probably not going to rise, might even fall ahead of week 8. But then in week 8, they are at the Raiders, and they have a very nice finish to the schedule beyond that. I don't know about the Chiefs defense in week 9 for a home game against the Bucs. We'll see about that when we get to it. But on the other side of that, there's a week 10 meeting with the Broncos in Kansas City. And then later in the season, we've got week 12 at Carolina, week 13 at home against the Raiders, week 14 against the Chargers, week 15 at the Browns, week 17 at the Steelers. So the Chiefs could be a defense that you play in week 8 and then just kind of stash the rest of the way, even in weeks where you're not using them.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And again, just a good real life defense and a defense that tends to face a lot of pass attempts because their run D is so good and the Chiefs are usually playing from ahead. So we like that. I also like the Lions as a week 8 streamer. Obviously, unfortunately, just lost Aiden Hutchinson for the season, but they get Tennessee, and whether it's still Will Levis at that point, we'll see. If it's not Levis, it's going to be Mason Rudolph. I think either way, the Lions at home, they're probably going to be double-digit favorites for that game. It's a good spot for that defense.
And I'll be surprised if the Lions don't pick up an edge player on the trade market from somewhere. Yeah. I don't know exactly who that's going to be, but there are plenty of teams out there that don't have playoff hopes, and these Lions have, Super Bowl wishes here and realistic ones. So it would make sense for them to pick up some kind of help at that position.
Maybe Max Crosby. The Raiders keep unloading.
Yeah, I've heard that talked about. Man, if I'm the Raiders, I'm sure trying not to unload Max Crosby because there's not a whole lot for your fans to like. He's one of the few pieces for them to actually buy the jersey and come to the game. So we'll see. They did trade away Khalil Mack not that long ago. Your free agent finder is synced with your team and your league right now. It's updated and ready to reveal to you the best waiver wire options that are actually available in your league right now. So check that out along with our waiver wire pickups articles for offense and IDPs. We'll be back here Thursday to preview the week 7 action. And in the meantime, we'll be working on all the usual weekly content and tools updates on draftsharks.com, all that stuff that makes us your unfair advantage.